unmute. Test. Okay. So it shouldn't be an echo now.
And it is working now. It's recording and we're good. We don't want to start till 11.
Yeah. So when you talk and you pick up, yeah, so it might, if you get an echo, you might have to mute this guy. Okay. Which shouldn't be much of a problem. But I think because we didn't join that audio, you're okay. Actually, you don't ever want to mute this guy. Sorry. If you get an echo, what you want to do is turn the speakers off up there because the speakers.
Okay.
We should be okay.
All right.
We'll test it. We'll see how it works. But this guy's going to be your help back here, so you don't have to run back and forth. Have him join. You'll admit up there, and then have him just join. You want to make sure both are on because this is the webcam for the connection. Make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Hey, where is Mary?
You know that.
Yeah, okay. I knew that. She just told me that we should possession and I wasn't.
Oh, yeah. How'd that go?
It was fun.
How was that class?
I don't really.
She said you did something about a meal that you.
Yeah, I'm not joining. We don't make a stupid meal. I'm not gonna go outside and make a burger.
How would you do?
Oh, sorry, I didn't say, like, if it was mandatory, I would obviously do it. We could take 5 projects and then it's like 9 to choose from. So I'm just not. Hi, everybody. Let's open the prayer, please.
Love does not exist. It is not here. It does not rejoice in our doing. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Father.
Last time we were looking at homosexuality in the Bible with Walter Wink's interpretation. What did you take from that? Take from it last time? I mean, summarize what you gleaned from all that. Oh yes, Katie, please.
Basically, you don't as a society hold so many things that Bible teaches, such as Constitution and marriage, and then I got the 11 and 13 why we have to follow pre-marriage.
Perfect, yes. Why don't have you on here, Bryce? Okay, Bryce, yes?
I was just going to say that the Bible is interpretation.
Yeah, that's good. And it is important to decide what we think, okay? See, in this class, I want you to make sure you know this. Whenever I'm teaching anything, I'm teaching you adult information. I am not doing child stuff. I'm not telling anybody to think a certain way, believe a certain thing. I'm giving you adult information. And what I'm hoping is that you evaluate your adult and make your best judgments about what you want to think. Because you, like me, are a human being who's trying to figure out life. Okay. So everybody did a good job there. Anybody else want to chime in with anything you thought last time? Add? Yes, perfect. There's always a context. There's always a historical context for how things were written in the Bible. And there's also, with regard, I love what he said about sexual ethics. that it would be a materialistic perspective to say somebody's outside of his or her world. You know, the thing is, everybody's trying to figure out with the will of God, with the judgments one makes, what to do. That's why, again, I say I have a hard enough time figuring out what I'm to do. I'm looking at someone else, it's none of my business. And frankly, I never think about it. Yeah. True. Yeah, a lot of people pick and choose, and even, I would argue even a little bit further there, Hannah, too, you think about this, that a lot of people were criticized, they heard other people doing critical parents and stuff, and so that got in them. You know? So people become racist, for example, because somebody else gave them that little gift, a hot potato. And again, it applies to homosexuality too. People said negative things, and then the child of the person gets kind of scared, or even, is this what I'm supposed to believe? Because this person in authority said it. You know, again, I will not pose myself as the authority figure because I think everybody needs to think for oneself. Okay, and I just want to go to the end here because I really do value what he says here. I like his judgment when he says, our moral task is to apply Jesus' love ethic to whatever sexual mores are prevalent in human culture. Jesus' love ethic is our measure. This doesn't mean everything goes. It means everything is to be critiqued by Jesus' love command. And as I said last time, it's kind of like basic rule for the Bible. If it's not loving, then I'm not taking it in. Similarly here. And so he says, instead of like command us, we're to offer reasons. You know, let's think through these things. And I really like this. Let's challenge both gays and straights to question our behaviors. You know, do they meet the requirements of love with fidelity and honesty and responsibility and genuine concern for the best interest of the other and of society as a whole? So our measure will be, again, not like an anything goes one, but an adult evaluation of our relationships, whether we're gay or straight. So again, you know, was the Bible, were these people who wrote the Bible inspired, or were they following cultural norms? Were they correct about violence and homosexuality and slavery and sexism and patriarchalism? Some people believe they were correct. Some people think they're not. Again, that's your prerogative. He is arguing, and I really like what he says here, when we are freed from bibliolatry, that means you're going to take this Bible, just do exactly what it says in every case, worship the Bible is restored to its proper place as a witness to the Word of God. And that Word is a person. What's clear is we're commanded to love one another, not just our gay brothers and sisters, but all of us involved in the debate. These are issues about which we should amiably agree. There are people who are going to be on either side of it. But the question is, where do you stand? And that's your business. Okay, next. Next, I'm going to share with you these 3 chapters of a book which I summarized in this PowerPoint. It's called The Bottom Line Catechism by Reverend Andrew Greeley, Catholic priest, well, he's dead now, and he's also get his doctorate in economics. Okay. Now his thesis here about marriage, and again we're dealing primarily about sexuality here. His thesis is that human beings, all of us, have a biological and a genetic tendency to pair bond, to marry. We have this tendency built into us. argues that this is built into us because those people who have that propensity survive. The evolution is not forward designing, it's about what survived. So it's all about past evaluation. These are the beings that survive, and we are the inheritors of their genetic and biological propensities. So it says, again, we're oriented to do this, to form permanent relations. I have heard contradictory, if you will, assessments of this, but ultimately they don't end up being contradictory. But other theorists have said, we also have a propensity to stray. So we have an instinct to pair bond, but we also have an instinct to stray. The reason I say we have the instinct to stray is because, let's say the day after I married Fran, he died. Evolution would not have designed a being that says, okay, that's the end of your reproductive capacities. They say, so we probably have both. Does that make sense? So again, this is not untrue, but maybe we need to, again, cushion it with the other inclination that we may all have. But again, these are the ones that survive, the ones who have this propensity to pair bond. Now he's going to make these arguments that give evidence for our propensity for this. First of all, our readiness for sexual relationships at almost any time. Like we're not like cats and dogs go to heat. You know, and only have sex at that time. Or there are some animals, antelopes, etc., who only breed when they know the ground's going to be lush. You know, those are the ones that survive. So again, they have those propensities. Whereas we have sex anytime. Also, the lengthy duration of the sexual embrace. We aren't a flame man, fancy man culture, or even being, if you will. We enhance our sexuality, our lovemaking by having prolonged, if you will, embrace, prolonged touching, etc. So that is evidence that we're going to bond with one person, not just through the sex act, coitus itself, but through all of this that surrounds it, like back rubs, rubbing you all over, and touching in certain places, erotic, etc. And also this affective component. What this means is that we have feelings associated with our sexuality. It's not like, again, the antelope mounts another one, and he mounts another one. You know, we have deep emotional reactions to our sexuality. And then he says, especially female secondary characteristics, like the female breasts, and all that. Okay. Again, none of these were strictly necessary for reproduction. They emerged again, reinforcing the link between a man and one man. And I want to give evidence of this, that if you are with someone a long time, what happens is you become the only one for you if you become intimate with them. I mean, I would even argue you get this deep. Like, Fran's voice is now the parental voice in my head, not my biological memory. Those went away a long time ago. Now Fran's nurturing voice is in my head. And we play as children together, so I play me. And so, nurture you and you know how to nurture. Play with it because it's born that way. And again, he says we have a drive towards sexual love. See how he's adding not just sex, sexual love. Now, this could be stronger in some people than others, but, and some people are selfish and some people are generous, but we do have this drive to love someone else sexually. Again, one. And so he's arguing if this is integral to our nature. Okay? And for Catholics, and this is not true of other Christian traditions, some other Christian traditions, human nature is basically good. We're not depraved. In other words, human beings, our nature is good. Therefore, because sexual love is part of our human nature, sexual love is also good. Again, programmed into our genes, programmed into our being. It can be part of why we stay together. We bond in this way. So that the way I experience it, I long for my husband. I long for his body. I long to be touched by him and embraced by him. So, you want to build that kind of longing for each other, not, you go home and you're like strangers in the house. At least I would argue, I think that's a relationship that most people want. If you're wrong about that. Take your best judgment. Okay. Now he's going to assert, as a Catholic priest, that two people who are passionately in love with one another have an intense effect, which is something like, though not nearly as powerful as God's passionate love for us. So God passionately loves each of us. What happens when you're passionately in love with someone else is you start to experience God's love through that other person, in and through that other person. So it gives you a sense of God's passionate love for you. How do we know God loves us? Did God send a lightning bolt or something written in Hebrew or Greek? No. People loved us. They were ministers. We are God's hands in the world. So by passionately loving your partner, you show your partner God's love. Well, again, this passionate sexual love that you get in marriage, which is unique to this relationship, is showing this person just how beautiful he or she is, not just in his ideas or you make dinner or make a cake. It's that your whole being is taken up. So for Catholics, the central point of marriage is not that it doesn't ever break apart, that it's insoluble, or to prohibit using contraception, or some kind of rule book that somebody should follow. It's about God's intense, passionate love for us. That's what we're experiencing. So the more intense married love, the better the sacrament it is. The sacrament is something that reveals God's grace. So again, a passionate love relationship between two people reveals God's love for us. Okay. So he says then in this chapter that bridal passion is a problem in marriage. And you might think of it this way. We're taught to control ourselves and what we do control ourselves. But the problem is in marriage, you gotta reverse it. Instead of controlling yourself, like a bridle is like a horse where you hold it back. Instead of controlling yourself in marriage, you gotta do the opposite. You have to surrender yourself. So he says the worst threat in marriage is where you're always holding back. You're yourself and your sexuality. And so he says, what happens is your passion becomes monotonous, routine, indifferent. Like, I mean, you've all seen the movies and TV programs where she's asleep and he wants to have sex. And she goes, oh, go ahead. You know, she's asleep. You know, it's like indifferent. It doesn't matter. Unchallenging, where you're not growing together and experiencing new things, unrewarding, or it's just like blah. That's a problem. And he says this type of passion is scarcely passion at all. Because what you're doing is you're supposed to be showing God's passion, passionate love for this person. If you're instead of just holding back all the time, etc., this person's not going to experience that, which is your vocation in marriage. Okay? And he also talks here in this chapter about telling passionate stories of God and also passionate experiences in your marriage. So he says these have mutual influence on one another. So imagining God's love for us in a new way helps in marriage. Because if you can know how much God loves you, then you can share that love with somebody else. You know you are the most precious one God ever created. And so is the next person. But you are. God is passionately in love with you. You take nothing else from this class. I do invite you that. God is passionately in love with you. Try to integrate that in your life. Okay. And this is where I say you might want to be careful because people in this kind of intense relationship start to converge in terms of their sense of who God is and their sense of the purpose of life. You just want so deeply that it's important to choose wisely somebody you want to travel with, somebody you want to take in. So again, he says sexual love is essential to the sacramentality of marriage. The more playful, uninhibited, imaginative, fantastic, surprising your sexual love is, the better the sacrament is. The better witness to God's love in the world it is. That's why when we're talking about birth, I said, I just invite you to really learn here to keep it play. Keep your sexuality play. Because if it becomes work or monotonous or even, well, I'll take this story. When Fran and I realized we're not conceiving children, I said, okay, let's just try these different positions. We'll say, do this. We did it for like 2 days. And I said, okay, we're done with this. It was just so medical. It was so weird. And got to do it this time of the day. And, I just know from that experience that you really don't want it to be some kind of purposeful. I don't even know how to describe it. Bad. Just bad. You want to keep your sexuality just absolutely. And I do invite this. I help people who have had some problems with sex. I talk to some people, and one woman she and her husband had not had sex for a year and a half. And I said, "Are you kidding me?" And I was untrusted woman. She said, it got where we didn't care anymore. And I said, "You learn how to play together." And it changed her life. She said when she started thinking of her sexuality as play, keep it in play. vulnerable, who wants to be touched, because she was desiring it. So, do the playful things. Okay, so again, the more wonderful your sexual relationship, the more authentic the sacrament. Greeley is convinced that sexuality and sacramentality go together. As a again, that's not to say you should have to adopt this. Marriage does require, sexual love does require that you're vulnerable. I mean, let's just face it, there you are, naked. You are there. And it's going to challenge the depths of who you are, and who you see yourself as, and who you see this other person. That's why I have said before here, and I think it's really important, at least for me in my marriage, never, ever, never bring a parent into the bedroom. You don't want children, you want your children, the child to be able to play. You don't want to be criticizing somebody. These people, this place to be creative. Now you can say things like, "Ooh, you move over there," or maybe try this, or that doesn't feel too good. How about this? You know, I appreciate you trying here in a new way. I like it better like this. You know, to reveal those things, that's very important to do as you learn each other's bodies, but not ever disagree. And especially not, you know, smell or disgusting. That's just downright cruel. You know, these don't ever do that. Okay. Again, we're vulnerable here, and we have to take risks. How can we justify taking these kinds of risks for ourselves? Because again, you're right out there. He says, and I like this, we have faith in the fundamental goodness of things. You know, we believe God is good, life is good, and you know, if you live in a world where you believe that love matters, you're going to get your heart broken. And it does require that you get hurt sometimes. You will get hurt. Even inadvertently. I mean, Fred and I have hurt each other many times, and we've apologized. And anytime you become intimate with somebody, you're going to hurt one another and have to learn how to get past that. Again, we're learning about God's love. And I would argue too, if you know God's love, you know, sometimes you get hurt, don't you? I remember this is years ago. I was supposed to do this service trip and really didn't want to go because I didn't want to be praying. So I was praying and said, God, I can have this one. You have to do this. We accept some things because we know how people were loved and we know we'll grow. There's a woman, a friend, and I helped her kids pay off the time. We bought her house and buy her pay her bills and stuff. She has these children and she would like to love them. And sometimes just don't. Get my head around. So even if I don't want to, it hurts, you know. Requires sacrifice. Just face it. And we grow in goodness. You know, sometimes we develop habits, it does become easier. Sometimes no, it doesn't. So take that. All right. Why do we risk getting hurt? God's love and our partner's love. It's because we know will be reconciled. We just love Jesus. We know. We just believe it. In other words, because we've experienced it. Life is such that we get love so much. I mean, just sit down and think how blessed we are. I mean, I just think how blessed we live here. I can. You start counting your blessings, you can see them forever. And we know too, we are called to join what's called the eternal wedding banquet. See the metaphor there for heaven, for paradise? It's one with the rebirth of all loves. So say we had instances in the past where it wasn't as perfect as we would want it to be. I told my mother-in-law, my stepmother, died. I was really so I hope one day I hope we can meet again and it'll be different. Okay, easy summary there. All right, so as I said, we have 3 articles here, 3 chapters. The first is on marriage. Now the second one is on explicitly on sex. Right? Greeley's position here is that our sexuality, again, distinguished from a biological social position, our sexuality orients us toward others. We live for others. We're dependent beings. We're dependent on God's love. We do not exist in isolation from other beings. And so he says we need to live for others. And our sexuality actually reveals that to us. There's a reason why people who sit around and masturbate every day the rest of their lives. They seek partners. They seek to know their love. So the question is, will we live for ourselves or will we live for others? It's true. And everybody has to make that choice. Will you live just for yourself in isolation or for others? St. Francis of Assisi was one of his central teachings is get over yourself and start living for others. And surrender yourself to God. Because it also meshes, says Greeley, with the source of any cooperation is to again look outward. And he says here too, there's a unique and special character to our sexuality in that it opens us up to others. Because again, I think if maybe there are some people, I don't want to speak for everyone, but most of us want to reach out and be loved and be loved. Even if someone is celibate, they're not called to isolate themselves. They're called to unite to whole communities, not their sexuality, of course. But they're called to unite, not, again, be closed in on themselves. Okay? No, he clarifies this. It's a mistake to ignore our biological vitals. That's why when we did our schema with the vital, cultural, deliberative, and religious levels, it's sublating or reordering those levels, not dismissing them. Our biology matters. Also, we don't want to just see our sexuality as a biological function. I have heard people say things like this, it's a need. You got to go do it. There are interpersonal elements to our sexuality that are really important. Okay. But suffice it to say, human sexuality must be selfless. It's not about, come please me. It means, let me give myself over to you. The desire to belong to someone else, create a home, create a family. So he says, just ask yourself these questions. Am I generous? If not, yes, then there's a problem. Am I hurting anybody by sexuality? If that's not enough. I haven't hurt people. It doesn't hurt anybody. The question that we need to ask is, am I helping you? Am I helpful? So how can we fulfill our vocation and mission as Christians regarding our sexuality? First, be passionate in our relationship with other people. And second, witness to God's permanent and public love for us by reserving our most intimate loves for those relationships to which we're permanently and publicly committed. So here he is, as you can see, shifting toward or moving us toward. The idea is that if you're ashamed of this, or if you can't make a public statement about it, then you might want to rethink what you're doing. Now, let me again say this. As a married woman, I don't like pushing that point too much because as I said the last time, there are a lot of years between when you start being sexual and when you can actually get married in any reasonable way. How do you get married if you don't have a job? How do you get married if you don't have your education? And so it's essential that people wait. You have to, unless you want to live in poverty. Anyway, okay, so what about promiscuity? Sleeping around. Says, we avoid promiscuity because we know this unique kind of love that is permanently and publicly. That's what Jesus said. I mean, Jesus permanently and publicly committed to us. So this is the way the followers of Jesus live. For religious and sacramental reasons, rather than moral and ethical ones. What is he saying here? This is really significant. We're going to give that a go. First of all, you got to get reasons matter. He's saying Christians don't avoid being like sleeping around with everybody because they're going to use the somebody's telling them they're bad. Critical care. That's what morality and ethics lead to wrong. It's not about being bad or wrong. What is it about? What's he mean when he says that it's about religious and sacramental reasons, showing up permanent publicly committed love? Why is that? Okay, let me take a mundane example. Okay. If I'm only kind to you because I know it's wrong to not be unkind, right? That's the only reason I'm going to be kind to you. And I'll be a bad person if I'm not kind to you. Look how different that is than I'm going to witness to God's love in this world. I want to show you that you are so loved by God. See how different that is. Joe, go ahead. Olivia, what do you think? How is it different? It's not a matter of morality and ethics. It's a matter of sacramentality and religious. Okay, so we're gonna go witness to that, yeah, right? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
God loves us unconditionally. We are their closest. Should we have
Not about I'm a bad person and I will do this. It's about I want to show this love in the world, and I want to be a witness to that love. Because I've been loved so much that I want to witness to that. Yes. And God really loves them. I'm recognizing that. Yeah, I like your distinction. That's nice. I would just put one more element in it if you were I. I'm saying you should. But to say, I put this element in. If God loves this person, I'm called to love this person and show love. It's not about my self-image of, okay, I don't want to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because, I'll be bad if I don't. It's I need to love. Like every time I go through this, giving money to this woman, she is loved by God. So are those 4 children. It's not about me being good or bad. It's about showing her God's love. Yeah, I love it. Okay. Now I did want to add this. This is not Greeley. This is Pope Francis. We will do more on. But I just want to add this. Look what he says here. A person once asked me in a provocative manner if I approved of homosexuality. I replied with another question. Tell me, when God looks at a gay person, does he endorse the existence of this person with love or reject the other person? We must always, always, always consider the person. Here we enter into the mystery of the human being. What we want to think about here is broaden our view. Every human being is an absolute mystery. That's why, even after 38 years, in France, gray hair and all that, this person, you just learn more and more. This person is God's mystery. And you can go deeper and deeper. And then he says, this is for church leaders. How are we treating the people of God? He says, I dream of a church that is a mother and a shepherd. The church ministers must be merciful, take responsibility, and accompany them, walk with them. He says, we need people who can warm the hearts of people, walk through the dark night with them. What's that mean? Walk through the dark night. You can descend into the people's night, into the darkness, without getting lost. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. Say somebody's baby died, and you walk with them. Say somebody, that is horrible, and it happens. When people have deep losses, great suffering, can you be with them and suffer it in your own body too? Because that's what it means to really accompany somebody. Is to, some people have been reading this with the man's guide, to attune with them, to feel that loss. That's not easy to do without getting lost. Okay. So again, he says, can the moral ideal be reconciled to sexual practice? says promiscuity is not only wrong and non-Catholic, it doesn't work. However, it's difficult sometimes in concrete circumstances to know what's chaste and what isn't. Okay. In the concrete situations of our lives. Like sleeping around with lots of people just doesn't work. You're gonna get denied all the time. I can't even imagine like having 10 people in my head or something. That's kind of what it would be like. So it doesn't work. But it says sometimes you don't know what's going on with somebody. You know, somebody feels, I just imagine a girl who feels no self-esteem, identity. I had a student, it's going to be like 10 years ago now, and she fought me on this. I don't talk about promiscuity, I didn't use this word. I like sleeping around with everybody. I remember at graduation, they just, all these guys were pretty much changing her name. I don't think that's healthy. That's not my judgment to make. I was not that person. I don't know what she was going through. I don't know how broken she was or how, I don't know. I didn't understand. But she had the right to make that decision. Okay? The last section here is premarital sex. So Greeley's going to differentiate physical virginity and sexual love. Emphasizing physical virginity is not part of the Catholic tradition. Again, here are the reasons. We believe that human love reflects a single-minded passion, total commitment to God. Right. That a commitment is essential. Secondly, our chastity is not physical, but mysterious, eschatological. This means end time stuff. It's about a total human beings coming together. And again, what we're doing is manifesting, demonstrating, making real the higher love that God needs to be. And also, again, the ultimate reason why young Catholics spiritually practice chastity is just what followers of Jesus do. They want to show committed love in the world, faithful love that doesn't ever abandon. Okay. Any questions? Does anyone have any concerns about both the man's and women? Everybody